Just to pick up from where we left off before lunch, interdisciplinarity is very much an important factor. I'm a professor in computer science, but in the Global Cybersecurity Capacity Centre, only I and Professor Sadie Priest, who's the director, are computer scientists. Everybody else is more or less a social scientist. We've got an engineer, international relations, we've got a lawyer, we've got sort of a policy wonk. And so we are very much coming at it from all directions. The Global Cybersecurity Capacity Centre is based in the Martin School in Oxford, which is the university's centre for interdisciplinary studies and to address the major problems of the 21st century, which sounded futuristic when they started it in 1990. Time has caught up with them, but they still do exciting things. They do food security, climate change, nanomaterials. They've got the Future of Humanity Institute, which has a philosopher who wants to freeze your head so that you can be resurrected in a few years' time. And we are physically based in computer science, who are looking after us when we outgrew the nest in the Martin School. The centre arose as a result of the London process that William Hague kicked off and launched the global conferences on cyberspace, and at the second one he announced that the government would be running a competition among the newly recognised academic centres of excellence in cybersecurity research to build a capacity building centre in cybersecurity. We looked at the money available, which was not a huge amount, and we reckoned that there wasn't much capacity building per se that you could do for that, but what we could do and what we had the expertise available to do was to try and put some scientific underpinning behind capacity building and to work out fairly rigorously what works and what doesn't. But in order to do that, the only sensible way we could think of was to find a way of measuring what capacity is, and then you can measure a country's capacity before it starts some initiative and measure it afterwards, and that gives you some idea of whether the initiative was helpful. It would be very nice to do proper controlled experiments, but countries don't really like being used as scientific subjects, and it also takes considerable time for you to see the effect of a lot of initiatives. So we have to work with what we've got, and we are starting now to do the second round of visits to countries and getting a few points on the time series so that we will be able to look at and see what has made any difference. So it was an Oxford-led consortium that had other UK universities, and we've since added others around the world. We've had Americans, we've had people from the University of Johannesburg involved, and so going back to our triple helix, we are academia. We are funded mostly by the Foreign and Commonwealth Office of the UK, but we've also had some nice money from the state government of Victoria in Australia, who have set up down the bottom right-hand corner the Oceania Cybersecurity Centre in Melbourne, who are a sort of repeater station for our work, and we collaborate with quite closely. We've also had money from the Global Forum for Cyber Expertise, which is backed by the Netherlands Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and also we have in the past, and we hope in the future, had money from the Norwegian Foreign Affairs Department. So that is government funding, and so we can put a link in on our Helix. The model which we developed is multidimensional. A lot of people, depending on which community you're talking to, either think that cybersecurity is a technological thing, and there have been some things which I've seen in the last couple of days which make me think that's a feeling in parts of this community. If you talk to another sector, then you will find that it's all a matter of policy and strategy and how you organise your government responses and so on. But we think it's both of those and more. The cyber culture and society dimension looks at the mindset in the community, whether people practice good hygiene, whether they trust the internet, whether they're right to trust the internet in their environment, whether they use e-commerce and e-government services and so on, whether they spend a large proportion of their time trying to get around the controls which the government has put in for their protection, as happens in some further flung countries. And so that defines the space that we're working in. Each of those dimensions is broken down into a number of factors, and then each of those factors presents a number of aspects which group together related indicators. The indicators are grouped so as to define stages of maturity, and so if you are in the lower block, then that will be relatively negative things, no evidence of such and such. But once you start getting up into the formative and established blocks, you are looking to have all of those indicators met in order to achieve the level that they are matching. And so if you've got all of C to I, but you're lacking D, then you will still be judged as startup because you haven't got enough for formative. And so if you haven't got enough for formative, then you can't have enough for established, even if you're a long way there. But we provide narrative as well as a spider graph showing your performance on the various factors, and it should be fairly obvious that that will be a quick win as a place to put investment. Unlike some indexes that operate by desk research purely or by sending a questionnaire to a designated representative in the government, we actually go and visit the country. We sometimes call it a self-assessment. You could do it as a self-assessment, but it's going to be more helpful to you if you get some guidance from good facilitators, which we hope we are, to introspect correctly into where your strengths and weaknesses are and where your gaps which require investment are. So we come and visit a country for typically 3 working days plus travel at either end, and we've done a lot ourselves, but we now have some deployment partners who I'll come back to later. And we have focus groups with typically 10 different sessions with different stakeholder groups, and we do 2 dimensions with each. So we get about 20 views of the 5 dimensions. So we get good triangulation of where things actually are. We don't rely on the ISPs saying the ISPs are all wonderful and do everything right. We also talk to their customers who may have a different view, and so this stops people grabbing for the numbers and means that you do get a fairly good synoptic view of the actual state of maturity of the country. One important thing about these visits is they are often facilitated by an external agency. So the World Bank has done a lot of those with us. The ITU and the CTO have done a few. And regional bodies like the Organization of American States have been very active in facilitating this activity. And they liaise with the government and open the doors, and they provide logistic support and often pay out travel and subsistence to make the visit. And so it's a good collaboration. So, international and regional organisations. I couldn't work out which strand I was supposed to put an arrow to for that one. So, is there one missing?
The next one.
But then it would have to be correct for quadruple helix. The stakeholder clusters cover just about everybody we can think of. Criminal justice, critical infrastructure, defence and intelligence, who are sometimes a bit reticent but will come and sit in the room and listen carefully. The IT side of things, the certs, academia and civil society, who are very important to get the sort of culture dimension covered, government and legislators and anybody else who will talk to us. So we've got a template which I don't expect you to be able to read, but we've got a whole bunch of people who we would tend to invite, and they cover all of the sectors. And so we've got multiple information sources, all the strands of the helix feeding into us. We've done this quite a lot. There have been more than 100 deployments since 2015, of which we have done 40% maybe. A lot have been done by the Organization of American States, who decided to do a full rollout across Latin America and Caribbean. So the brownish blobs on the map are places that they have been and we haven't. And they have been to all their countries twice now. So they are starting to provide some time series for us. The orange ones in LAC are ones where we have done one of the two ourselves, and the OS has done the other. But we've covered the rest of the world quite well as well. Lots in Asia, lots in Africa, which I'll come on to in more detail. Some out in the Pacific. That's the remit of the Oceania Centre. They've been instructed or funded at least to do the 15 countries in that region over 3 years they had funding, initial funding for. They've got a way to go yet, but they have certainly made a good start. We are also planning that there will be visits to places like Pakistan and India in the coming year, and there will get many more dots around the world. There are a large number in Africa, a fair number we have done, but also World Bank consultants have been working in Southern Africa with some assistance from us, and they also have a mandate to work in the ECOWAS countries. So I think as we speak they're doing either Niger or Côte d'Ivoire, and they've done the other one last week or next week. I may lose track. But so in total there are 20 in Africa, and we are putting the data together. We've now got, as I said, 100 deployments, so that is getting to be quite a rich data set. We are doing this work partly because it's something our sponsors want us to do, but also we are a research university and the lifeblood of research is data. So one of our conditions for coming to do a review of a country is that we can take the data away and use it for academic research and answer the question that we were originally set up to answer. But this is a semi-random sample of those 20 African deployments. I think it's based on 8 or 10. The highest scoring factors listed there are ones where at least 3/4 of the aspects involved across the various countries that are in the sample have reached the formative stage, the second level. And in one case, in the National Cybersecurity Strategy factor, one country has reached established, which is, I think, reflects the work that the international community has been doing. The ITU and the CTO have both been doing their own national cybersecurity development work around the region. National availability of cyber education and training is in that block, which must be nice for the academia in this part of the world. The lowest scoring factors are cybersecurity marketplace. There isn't a lot of local product development in the continent, at least outside South Africa. This has been South Africa would help push that average up quite a lot. Crisis management is something which is never as fully prepared as you might hope. Not many countries have the resources to do full-blown exercises to work out what would happen, which is probably something that you need to do if you want to be able to respond properly when they do come and hit you. And responsible disclosure is something which is fairly universally badly handled. There are far too many places where you can get sued for telling a bank that they've got a wide open hole in their website or whatever. So not many places have regulations that mandate that you should disclose a flaw or have a plan for fixing it, and some reasonable deadlines for getting things sorted. So that I'm not terribly surprised that those are the ones which come near the bottom of this list. But we've done a lot of countries, we've got a lot more to do. We're to some extent victims of our own success. CHOGM in April last year, the heads of government subscribed to the Commonwealth Cyber Declaration, and it has an implementation plan attached, point one of which is everybody should try and have themselves assessed before the next meeting in May 2020, and not only should countries themselves volunteer, but it's up to other people, the wealthier nations, to help enabling that happen. So that has brought a lot more work over the past year and the next year, and really too much work for one small team. We're something not much over half a dozen people, full-time equivalent. So our solution to that is to replicate and delegate. I've already mentioned the Oceania Centre, which has been working for nearly 2 years now on getting their area covered. We have reached a tentative agreement with the University of Cape Town and Research ICT Africa to set up another centre in Cape Town, and that is awaiting funding decision from one of our friendly foreign national sponsors. So we will see how that develops. We're also hoping to develop one in Singapore, probably, to cover Southeast Asia, and the other circles are a bit ambitious, I suspect, though it may happen in the next 5 years that we will set up places elsewhere. North and East Africa are possible. Latin America is another candidate, but I can't really imagine that we want to put it in Venezuela, which is, I think, where that centre circle is at the moment, just at the current political situation, but somewhere over there. So we've upped the academia content of our team. But we're also delegating to people who we've been able to train up to get some of this work done. NRD Cybersecurity is a Lithuanian consultancy who were endeared themselves to us by brokering a review of Lithuania, which is not otherwise necessarily an easy country to get into. And we've since worked with them in Bangladesh. They've done a review of Ecuador on their own, and so on. But also, going back to the international organisations, the World Bank has got consultants who are working, as I've said. The OAS has done their regional study. The ITU has done a number of surveys in Africa and also has been the facilitator for the Oceania Centre in a number of their reviews. And so that ties us in there. But as I said, the World Bank are consultants, so I suppose there is a dotted line back up to industry there. And the reports come out and they have recommendations for all sectors. So we've got a fork going the other way from the information source as well. And the industry also tends to be consultancies that come in and pick up the pieces after we've made these recommendations. We don't have the resources to help countries to implement those recommendations, so they tend to go to industry to get assistance for that. What are we doing for time? I will go swiftly through the. I don't think I'll read out the text. You can read it fast if you're good enough. And if will you be circulating slides?
If you give us permission to do so, yes.
Yes, so you can read them later. The Gambia was somewhere which had a lot of response to our review. Senegal say that the review recommendations informed the development of their national strategy and the formation of an implementation task force for it. In Ghana, there was a lot that happened after the review, and not necessarily because of the review, but we like to think there was some correlation. And they said nice things about us too. Ministry of Communications quote there. If you want to know more, you will get a chance to read the slides in slow time, but there's also a document we produced for our annual conference in February this year, which is available in digital form on the portal website, which also has a copy of the model. It has all the reviews that governments have published so far linked to, and so on. So it's not a memorable URL, but if you Google for Cybersecurity Capacity Centre, it's probably the top hit, and there are other search engines available if you wish to avoid that one. So thank you for all.